They seated me at table 12, behind a flower arrangement that could hide a small aircraft, like I was some embarrassing relative they hoped would vanish into the centerpiece. I smiled sweetly and decided this charming boy had no idea what storm he was about to walk into. 3 days later, he'd show up at my door with papers that would make me laugh for weeks. If you're reading this, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. What Marcus Thornfield didn't know was that this helpless widow had been keeping some very expensive secrets. The morning had started with such optimism. I'd chosen my outfit with the precision of a chess master, modest gray dress that whispered harmless widow, paired with my grandmother's pearls for just enough dignity to avoid looking pitiful. My hair was done at Martha's salon, nothing too fancy, just respectable enough for my daughter's wedding. "Mom, you look acceptable," Emma said when I arrived, already distracted by whatever crisis the wedding coordinator was having. Acceptable, like a participation trophy in human form. I watched my daughter glide around in great-grandmother's lace, the one beautiful thing our family had managed to keep through the years. She looked radiant, absolutely glowing with that new bride energy that makes everyone temporarily forget their own problems. But as the guests filtered in, the social hierarchy became crystal clear. Marcus's parents swept in like visiting royalty, his mother, Patricia, dripping in enough diamonds to blind passing aircraft. She worked the room with surgical precision, air-kissing the important people while somehow managing to look straight through me like I was furniture. "Excuse me," I told the frazzled usher, showing my table assignment. "I believe there's been a delightful mistake here. Table 12, ma'am. Right behind the decorative feature." Decorative feature. How diplomatically they put it. I was being hidden behind enough flowers to supply a funeral home. I navigated to my designated exile, which offered a spectacular view of absolutely nothing except hibiscus and baby's breath. From my horticultural prison, I could watch the festivities unfold in the large mirror across the room. There I was, Sylvia Hartley, 72 years of accumulated wisdom tucked away like last week's newspaper. The ceremony was beautiful, I'll grant them that. Emma floated down the aisle like something from a fairy tale, and Marcus cleaned up nicely in his expensive suit. But during cocktail hour, I noticed something fascinating about my new son-in-law. He had different smiles, megawatt charm for the obviously wealthy guests, practiced politeness for the useful ones, and complete indifference for anyone who looked like they might ask favors instead of offering opportunities. "Mrs. Hartley!" I turned to find Marcus himself approaching, armed with his most dazzling smile, the one reserved for people he was about to manipulate. "Isn't this just magical?" he said, gesturing at the reception like he'd personally arranged the sunset. "You must be absolutely bursting with pride." "Oh, I'm practically vibrating with maternal joy," I replied, my voice sweeter than artificial sweetener. "Though I must say, the view from here is quite educational." He either missed the acid in my tone or chose to ignore it like a seasoned politician. "I was hoping we could spend some quality time together soon. Really get to know each other properly. How refreshing. Most people usually manage that before marrying into the family, but I do admire your commitment to handling things in reverse chronological order." That earned me a microscopic pause in his smile. Barely a flicker, but I caught it like a hawk spotting prey. "I was thinking dinner this week, just the two of us. I have some fascinating ideas about family collaboration." Family collaboration. How deliciously ominous. "Well, I do love a good mystery dinner. Thursday work for your busy schedule? Perfect. I know this place downtown. Very private. Excellent for meaningful conversations." Meaningful conversations about what, I wondered? My thrilling stamp collection? My weekly bridge club scandals? "I can hardly contain my excitement," I said, fanning myself with my napkin like a southern belle having the vapors. As he glided away to charm more promising prospects, I caught my reflection in that mirror again. A silver-haired woman in understated clothes, sitting alone behind enough flowers to stock a botanical garden. Someone who looked like she probably shopped with coupons and worried about heating bills. Exactly the image I'd been cultivating for 2 years. During the father-daughter dance, I slipped away to powder my nose in the marble ladies' room. In that fancy sanctuary, I touched up my lipstick and practiced my harmless, elderly widow expression in the mirror. When I returned to my floral fortress, Marcus was charming the elderly couple next to me, the Hendersons from Robert's old firm. They were eating up his attention like it was wedding cake. "Mrs. Hartley," he said, catching my eye as I sat down. "Really looking forward to Thursday." "So am I, dear. So am I. As Emma tossed her bouquet and the evening wound down, I watched my new son-in-law work the room with the efficiency of a seasoned con artist. He clearly had elaborate plans brewing in that handsome head. Too bad for Marcus. I'd spent 72 years learning that the most dangerous opponents are usually the ones everyone underestimates. And this old widow was about to become very, very dangerous. The post-wedding aftermath lasted exactly 48 hours before the real show began. Emma called daily, each conversation a breathless symphony of marital bliss and how wonderfully Marcus was treating her. He's so thoughtful, Mom, always thinking ahead about our future and financial security. Security. The word floated through our conversations like smoke before a fire. How lovely. Sweetheart, a husband should definitely think about money, constantly, especially other people's money. What do you mean? Nothing, dear, just that financial planning is so romantic. Emma missed the sarcasm entirely, which was probably for the best. Wednesday crawled by like a dental procedure you couldn't reschedule. I spent the day doing thrilling widow activities, dusting Robert's books, deadheading roses, and wondering what my charming new son-in-law wanted to discuss over what would undoubtedly be overpriced wine. Thursday evening arrived with all the enthusiasm of a tax audit. I dressed for my role as modest widow. Simple black dress that suggested respectability without prosperity, paired with my mother's pearl earrings and Robert's broken watch that still looked dignified from a distance. The restaurant Marcus had chosen was one of those places where they pronounce water with a French accent, and the waiters look at you like you're personally responsible for their artistic disappointment. He was already seated when I arrived, looking every inch the successful young executive. "Sylvia," he practically levitated from his chair. "You look absolutely radiant." "Thank you, dear. This place certainly is something." And it was something, all right. The kind of something that made you wonder if they charged extra for the privilege of feeling inadequate. We ordered wine. He insisted on a bottle that probably had more syllables than my high school diploma, and settled into what he clearly thought would be an easy conversation. "So," he began, swirling his wine like a sommelier with delusions of grandeur, "how are you managing life on your own?" "Oh, just brilliantly. 72 years of practice makes most things seem trivial." Of course, but surely it gets overwhelming sometimes? That big house, all those decisions?" He was fishing with the subtlety of dynamite in a trout pond. "Robert always said I had enough opinions for 3 people, so I keep myself thoroughly entertained." He laughed, that practiced boardroom laugh that probably worked wonders on investors and gullible elderly relatives. "That's wonderful, but seriously, don't you worry about practical matters? Finances, legal issues, people who might take advantage of your generous spirit?" There it was, the real topic, dressed up in concern and served with expensive wine. "Should I be worried about something specific, Marcus?" "Not worried exactly, but prepared. You know how complicated things can become, especially for someone in your unique situation." "My unique situation." Like being a widow was a rare medical condition. And what situation would that be exactly? He leaned forward, his voice dropping to that confidential tone men use when they're about to explain something to the little woman. "Well, living alone, making major decisions without guidance, being vulnerable to people who might not have your best interests at heart, vulnerable to people like him, presumably. How thoughtful of you to be concerned about my vulnerability. I've actually been consulting with my attorney about protective measures for people in situations like yours." Protective measures? How delightfully patronizing. "What kind of protection are we discussing?" He reached into his jacket with the flourish of a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat. Out came a manila folder, which he placed on the table like it was the Holy Grail. "Just some basic paperwork. Nothing dramatic, simply safeguards in case you ever need assistance making important decisions." I opened the folder with the enthusiasm of someone handling a live snake. Power of attorney. Power of financial oversight. Medical decision-making authority. Complete control disguised as loving concern. This is quite comprehensive. My lawyer specializes in elder care. He's handled many cases like yours, cases like mine. I was apparently a case study now. How fascinating. And Emma is aware of this thoughtful initiative? She thinks it's brilliant. Really, Sylvia, we just want to ensure you're protected from anyone who might take advantage of your trusting nature. My trusting nature. The boy really had done his homework. Protected from whom, specifically? Oh, you know, dishonest contractors, questionable investment advisors, relatives who might suddenly become very interested in your welfare. Relatives who might suddenly become interested. The irony was so thick you could serve it for dessert. How prescient of you to anticipate such problems. It's just common sense. These things are much easier to arrange before any complications develop. Complications like me maintaining control of my own life. I see. And this needs to be handled quickly because timing matters with these arrangements. The longer you wait, the more questions might arise about your capacity to make such decisions. My capacity. He was already laying groundwork for declaring me incompetent. Well, I said, closing the folder and placing my hands on top of it like I was blessing it. This certainly requires careful consideration. Relief flooded his face like he'd just landed a major client. Of course, take all the time you need, though my attorney did emphasize that prompt action would be advisable. Prompt action. Before I had time to think or consult anyone with functioning brain cells. I'll definitely want to review this with my own legal counsel. His smile flickered like a candle in wind. Your own lawyer? Oh yes, I know it seems silly, but I'd feel more comfortable having someone explain it in terms my simple mind can grasp. Sylvia, I really think we should finalize this tonight. These matters work best when handled efficiently. Before I had time to realize I was being robbed. I'm sure your notary will understand that important decisions shouldn't be rushed. My what? Your notary. You did bring one, didn't you? You seem so prepared for everything else. The mask slipped completely. How did you know about the notary? Lucky guess. You strike me as someone who plans ahead. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to determine if I was genuinely naive or actively resisting his con. Of course, he said finally. Take all the time you need. But his eyes said something entirely different. His eyes said he was done playing games with the harmless old widow. Too bad for Marcus, the harmless old widow was just getting started playing games with him. The weekend passed with deceptive calm, but I could feel Marcus's impatience crackling through the phone lines like static electricity. Emma called twice, both times casually inquiring about that helpful paperwork Marcus showed you. Still mulling it over, sweetheart. He's just trying to help. Mom, he knows so much about legal things. Legal things. Like theft was just another item on a professional development checklist. Monday morning brought a call that confirmed my suspicions about my charming son-in-law's true nature. Sylvia, it's Marcus. I hope you've had time to think about our discussion. Oh, I've been thinking about very little else. Wonderful. I was hoping we could meet again this week. I have some additional information that might help clarify things. Additional information. More sophisticated lies, presumably. How thoughtful. Same restaurant? Actually, I was thinking somewhere more private. Maybe your home. I could bring some documents that would be easier to review in a comfortable setting. My home, where he could pressure me without witnesses. What kind of documents? Just some examples of how these arrangements have helped other families. Success stories, you might say. Success stories about elderly people who'd surrendered their independence to charming predators. That sounds fascinating. Wednesday evening? Perfect. Around 7? Wednesday couldn't come fast enough. I spent the intervening days doing what I did best, observing and planning. If Marcus wanted to play games in my house, I'd make sure the game was rigged in my favor. Wednesday evening, I prepared for battle. Simple gray dress, minimal jewelry, the perfect costume for a woman about to spring a very expensive trap. Marcus arrived precisely at 7, armed with his briefcase and his most trustworthy smile. Sylvia, thank you so much for agreeing to meet here. I know this whole situation can feel overwhelming. Oh, I'm not overwhelmed at all. I'm actually finding it quite educational. He settled into my living room like he belonged there, spreading documents across my coffee table with practiced efficiency. I brought some case studies of families who've benefited from these arrangements. I think you'll find them reassuring. How thoughtful. But before we discuss other people's stories, I have some questions about your story. My story? Yes. I'm curious about your background, your qualifications for managing other people's lives. His confident expression flickered slightly. Well, I have extensive business experience. In what field? Investment management. Primarily. For which firm? I work independently now. And before that, various positions in financial services. Various positions. How delightfully vague. How long have you been advising elderly people about their financial decisions? I wouldn't call it advising exactly. More like protective planning. And how many elderly people have you protected? A few. Families who needed guidance. Guidance they requested, or guidance you suggested they needed? The room fell silent, except for the ticking of my grandmother's clock. Sylvia, I think there might be some misunderstanding about my intentions. Oh, I understand your intentions perfectly. And what I'm curious about is your methods. My methods? For identifying vulnerable targets, for gaining their trust, for convincing them to sign away their rights. I would never what, Marcus? Never target elderly widows? Never manipulate them with false concern? Never steal their independence under the guise of protection? His mask was cracking like old paint. You're making serious accusations. I'm making serious observations about a serious predator who made a serious mistake. What mistake? I smiled, channeling every ounce of steel Robert had ever seen in me, assuming I was just another helpless widow. Sylvia, I think you're confused. I'm not confused at all. I know exactly what you're trying to do. The question is whether you know what I'm about to do. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I've been recording this conversation. I'm talking about the private investigator who's been documenting your activities. I'm talking about the attorney who's preparing criminal charges. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. You can't prove anything. I can prove everything. Your financial troubles, your debts, your pattern of targeting elderly women. All of it. That's impossible. Is it? Tell me, Marcus, how much do you owe in gambling debts? He went very still. How do you know about that? I know everything about you, including the fact that you're not my first admirer. What do you mean? I mean, you're not the first charming young man who's tried to separate me from my assets. The difference is, this time I was prepared. Prepared how? I stood up, my voice dropping to a whisper that could cut glass. Prepared to destroy anyone who tries to steal what my husband spent 40 years building. You don't understand. I'm desperate. You need to leave, now, before I call the police. Sylvia, please, we can work something out. The only thing we're working out is whether you leave voluntarily or in handcuffs. Marcus gathered his papers with shaking hands, his carefully constructed plan crumbling around him like a house of cards in a hurricane. This isn't over. Yes, I said, thinking of Robert's secrets waiting in the basement. It is. After he left, I poured myself a glass of Robert's best wine and sat in my quiet kitchen. Tomorrow, I'd go down to the basement and open that old safe. Tomorrow, I'd learn exactly what weapons my husband had left me. Tonight, I'd savor the look of panic in Marcus Thornfield's eyes when he realized he'd chosen the wrong widow to mess with. Some predators learn too late that sometimes the prey has bigger teeth than the hunter. Thursday morning, I stood at the top of my basement stairs holding Robert's key, my heart pounding with anticipation and dread. For 2 years, I'd avoided this moment, too grief-stricken to face whatever secrets my husband had left behind. Marcus Thornfield had just given me an excellent reason to overcome my reluctance. The basement smelled like old paper and Robert's cologne, the scent still clinging to his clothes hanging in the corner. His desk sat exactly as he'd left it, crossword puzzles, coffee-stained coasters, the reading glasses he'd worn for 40 years. The safe was hidden behind a panel I'd never noticed, camouflaged to look like part of the concrete wall. Robert had always been cleverer than he let on. Inside, I found documents that made my hands shake, bank statements showing accounts I'd never heard of, investment records spanning decades, legal papers establishing trusts and protections I didn't know existed. And at the very bottom, a letter in Robert's familiar handwriting that changed everything. My dearest Sylvia, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and someone is trying to take advantage of your generous heart. I'm sorry I never told you about the money, $33 million, properly protected and completely yours. I lived modestly so we could die wealthy, and I hid our wealth so you'd be safe from predators, exactly like whoever drove you to open this safe. $33 million. I sat down heavily on Robert's old chair, the numbers swimming in front of my eyes. $33 million. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. The letter continued. There's a business card in this envelope for Carol Peterson. She's handled everything since I got sick. She knows about the threats you might face, and she has instructions to help you fight back. Don't let anyone steal what I spent 40 years building for you. Use every penny if you have to. Make them regret the day they decided to mess with my wife. I found Carol's card and called immediately. Peterson Law Office. This is Sylvia Hartley. I believe my husband Robert arranged for you to assist me. Mrs. Hartley, I've been waiting 2 years for your call. Can you come in today? How soon? How about right now? Carol Peterson's office was nothing like the stuffy legal chambers I'd expected. Modern, bright, with family photos scattered among law degrees. She was younger than I'd imagined, maybe 50, with sharp eyes and a handshake that could crack walnuts. Sylvia, please sit. Robert told me this day might come. What day? The day someone tried to manipulate you into signing away your rights. She spread documents across her desk, trust papers, investment records, legal protections I'd never dreamed of. Your husband was remarkably prescient. He predicted someone would approach you within 2 years of his death, probably through family connections, trying to gain control of what they assumed were modest assets. But they're not modest. No, they're not. $33 million, completely protected in an irrevocable trust. You control everything, but no one else can access it, even if they somehow gained power of attorney. Even if I signed Marcus's papers? Even then. Robert specifically designed this to protect you from exactly that kind of manipulation. I leaned back, feeling like I was seeing my life clearly for the first time in 2 years. So Marcus can't touch any of it? Marcus can't touch a penny. But more importantly, you now have the resources to make sure he never tries this again. What do you mean? Carol smiled with something that looked almost predatory. I mean, we're going to destroy him so thoroughly that he'll spend the rest of his life warning other predators about the dangers of underestimating widows. How? Criminal charges for attempted fraud, civil suits for damages, and we're going to investigate every financial transaction he's made for the past 5 years. Is that legal? Perfectly legal when someone attempts to defraud you. We'll find out where his money came from, where it went, and who else he owes. We'll expose his entire operation. Operation? Oh yes. Men like Marcus don't work alone. There's a whole network of people who target elderly victims. We're going to find them all. I thought about Emma, about her tears when she talked about Marcus's debts, about how carefully he'd manipulated both of us. What happens to my daughter's marriage? That's up to Emma, but she'll make that decision with complete information instead of lies and manipulation. And the money remains secret until you decide otherwise. The beauty of Robert's plan is that you can live exactly as you have been. Or you can buy a yacht tomorrow. Your choice. I gathered up the trust documents, feeling like I was holding lightning in my hands. When do we start fighting back? We already started. The moment you walked into my office, Marcus Thornfield became a target instead of a hunter. As I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about Robert's letter. He'd known this would happen. He'd prepared for it. He'd armed me for a war I didn't even know was coming. But more than that, he'd given me permission to win. That evening, Emma called. Mom, Marcus seems really upset about something. He won't tell me what happened at your meeting. We had a fascinating conversation about his plans for my future. What kind of plans? The kind that assume I'm too stupid to protect myself. Mom, he's just trying to help. Sweetheart, there are things about your husband you don't know. Things about our family finances you don't know. Tomorrow, I think it's time you learned the truth. What truth? The truth about what your father really left me. And the truth about what I'm going to do to anyone who tries to steal it. The silence on the other end was deafening. Mom, you're scaring me. Good. It's about time someone in this family was properly scared. After Emma hung up, I sat in my kitchen holding Robert's letter, thinking about $33 million and the war it was about to buy me. Marcus Thornfield thought he was hunting a helpless widow. He was about to discover he'd walked into the lair of a very wealthy, very angry dragon. And dragons don't negotiate with thieves. They incinerate them. Friday morning arrived with Carol Peterson's call and the sweet promise of professional revenge. I found a lawyer who specializes in prosecuting elder fraud. She wants to meet with you today. How soon? This afternoon. She's very interested in Marcus's case. Why? Because she thinks he's part of a larger operation. If we can prove that, we can bring down the entire network. The afternoon meeting took place in the district attorney's office, where I met Sarah Chen, a sharp-eyed prosecutor who looked like she ate insurance fraud for breakfast. Mrs. Hartley, tell me about your son-in-law's approach. I walked her through every conversation, every manipulation, every carefully crafted lie Marcus had fed me and Emma. Classic pattern, she said, making notes. Family connection, financial pressure, urgency to sign documents. He's done this before. How can you tell? Because amateurs make mistakes. Marcus knew exactly which emotional buttons to push, which legal phrases to use, how to structure the timeline. This is his profession. So what do? We set a trap, make him think he's won, then document everything he does next. Carol leaned forward. What kind of trap? Mrs. Hartley calls him, says she's reconsidered, wants to move forward with signing the papers. We record everything, his response, his instructions, his timeline. And then we arrest him the moment he brings a notary to witness the signing. I smiled, thinking of Marcus's desperation, his gambling debts, his absolute certainty that he'd manipulated a helpless widow. When do we spring this trap? Monday. That gives us the weekend to set up recording equipment and coordinate with the police. Saturday, I spent the day preparing for the performance of my life, practicing my grateful widow voice, rehearsing my lines about feeling safer with Marcus's protection. Sunday brought Emma, looking worried and confused. "Mom, Marcus has been acting strange. He keeps asking about Dad's finances, about whether you might have hidden accounts or investments. What did you tell him?" "That I don't know anything about your money." "But Mom, why is he so interested?" I looked at my daughter, beautiful, trusting, completely unaware that her husband was a predator hunting her mother. "Because he needs money more desperately than you realize." "How desperately?" "Desperately enough to steal it from his wife's mother." Emma stared at me. "You really think he's trying to steal from you?" "I know he is. The question is whether you're ready to see proof." "What kind of proof?" "The kind that will destroy your marriage, but save your mother." Emma was quiet for a long time. Finally, "Show me." Monday morning, I called Marcus with the performance of my lifetime. "Marcus, it's Sylvia. I've been thinking about our conversation." "Oh?" His voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the excitement underneath. "I think you're right. I do need protection. I'd like to move forward with those papers." The relief in his voice was audible. "That's wonderful, Sylvia. When would be convenient?" "As soon as possible. This weekend made me realize how vulnerable I really am." "Perfect. I can have everything ready by this afternoon." "This afternoon?" I let a note of elderly confusion creep into my voice. "Isn't that rather fast?" "These things work best when handled efficiently. I'll bring my notary. We'll get everything signed, and you'll be completely protected." Protected from him. "Well, if you think it's best, I do. Let's say 3 o'clock? At your house?" 3 o'clock sounds perfect. After I hung up, Carol nodded approvingly from her position monitoring the recording equipment. "He took the bait completely. Now what?" "Now we wait for him to hang himself with his own rope." At exactly 3 o'clock, Marcus arrived with his briefcase, his notary, and his most trustworthy smile. Hidden cameras captured everything as he spread documents across my coffee table. "Sylvia, I can't tell you how relieved I am that you're taking this step. I realized you were right about the dangers. An old woman like me needs guidance." "Exactly. Now, these papers will give Emma and me the authority to protect your interests." "All of my interests?" "All of them. Financial decisions, medical choices, living arrangements. Everything. Living arrangements." He was already planning to warehouse me somewhere convenient. "And this needs to be notarized today because delays create complications. The sooner we get this in place, the sooner you're protected." I picked up the pen, letting my hand shake slightly. "This is quite overwhelming. I know it seems complicated, but trust me, this is the best thing for everyone." Trust him, the man who was stealing my life while promising to protect it. I signed the first page, then paused. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What happens to my money after I sign this?" "Your money will be professionally managed. No more worrying about investments or bills or financial decisions." "By whom?" "By people with experience. People who understand these things." "People like you?" "People like Emma and me." "Yes." I signed the second page. "And if I change my mind later?" "Well, that would depend on your mental state at the time. These arrangements are designed to be permanent. Permanent. Like a life sentence." "I see." I signed the third page. "Marcus, there's something I should mention." "What's that?" "I think there might be more money than you realize." His eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "More money?" "Robert may have had some accounts I didn't know about. Hidden investments, perhaps." "How much more money, Sylvia?" And there it was. The greed, the desperation, the absolute confirmation that this was never about protecting me. "I'm not sure. Maybe significant amounts." Marcus's hands were actually shaking now. "Significant how?" "Well," I said, setting down the pen without signing the final page, "that's where things get interesting." "What do you mean?" I smiled, thinking of $33 million and the trap we'd just sprung. "I mean you're under arrest, Marcus. You have the right to remain silent." The police emerged from their hiding places as Marcus's face went white with shock and terror. You can't." "I can. I did. And now you're going to learn what happens to predators who hunt the wrong prey." As they led him away in handcuffs, I heard him screaming about entrapment and legal challenges. But all I heard was the sound of justice being served with a $33 million side of revenge. The news broke that evening. Local businessman arrested in elder fraud sting operation. Marcus's perp walk played on every channel, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Emma called, sobbing. "Mom, what have you done?" "I've protected myself from your husband's attempt to steal my independence and my assets." "But the arrest, the charges, this will destroy him." "Good. That was the point." "How can you be so cold? How can you defend a man who was systematically planning to rob your mother?" Emma showed up an hour later, her eyes red from crying. I sat her down and played the recording of Marcus's confession. Every greedy word, every calculated manipulation, every moment he'd revealed his true nature. He was going to put me in a nursing home, sweetheart. He was going to steal everything your father left me and convince everyone I was too senile to object. But he loves me. He loves what he thought you could get him. There's a difference. I showed her the financial records Carol had uncovered, the gambling debts, the fake business ventures, the systematic targeting of elderly widows. This isn't his first time, Emma. You're married to a professional predator. She stared at the evidence, her face cycling through denial, anger, and heartbreak. What am I supposed to do now? Whatever you want, but you'll do it with complete information, not with lies and manipulation. Tuesday brought Marcus's father, pompous and furious. Sylvia, you've destroyed my son's life over a misunderstanding. I've exposed your son's criminal behavior. There's a difference. He was trying to help you. He was trying to rob me. The recordings don't lie. This is vindictive, cruel. This is justice. Your son chose to prey on elderly women. Now he gets to experience the consequences. Wednesday brought Marcus's bail hearing, where he tried to paint himself as a concerned family member who'd been entrapped by a paranoid widow. The judge wasn't impressed. Mr. Thornfield, the evidence suggests a systematic attempt to defraud an elderly family member. Bail is set at $500,000, $500,000. Money Marcus didn't have. He'd be staying in jail until trial. Thursday brought a visit from Carol with updates that made my morning coffee taste even better. The FBI is interested in Marcus's case. They think he's connected to a multi-state elder fraud ring. How big? Potentially dozens of victims, millions in stolen assets. If they can flip Marcus, they might bring down the entire operation. Will he cooperate? Depends how much prison time he's facing. 20 years tends to make people very talkative. 20 years. Marcus would be middle-aged when he got out, assuming he survived that long in prison. Friday brought Emma's decision. She filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and emotional fraud. I can't stay married to someone who tried to rob my mother, she told the lawyer. What about the house, the cars, the lifestyle he provided? All bought with borrowed money and false promises. I want nothing that came from his schemes. Emma moved back to town, finding an apartment near mine. The experience had changed her, made her stronger, more suspicious, more aware of how people could be manipulated. I feel so stupid, she said one evening as we sat on my porch. You trusted someone you loved. That's not stupid, it's human. But all the signs were there. The expensive lifestyle, the vague answers about money, the sudden interest in you after we got engaged. He was very good at what he did. Professional manipulators are trained to exploit trust. How did you know? I didn't at first, but your father left me resources, tools to fight back when someone tried to steal what he'd built. What kind of resources? I looked at my daughter, wondering if she was ready for the truth about Robert's legacy. The kind that turn helpless widows into very dangerous enemies. Mom, exactly how much money did Dad leave you? Enough to destroy anyone who tries to steal it. The trial began in September. Marcus's lawyer tried every defense. Diminished capacity, entrapment, family misunderstanding. Nothing worked. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings were damning. The pattern of targeting elderly victims was undeniable. When they played the audio of Marcus discussing my mental state and his plans for permanent control of my assets, even his own lawyer looked disgusted. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes, guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge looked down at Marcus with contempt. Mr. Thornfield, you systematically targeted vulnerable elderly people, destroyed their independence, and stole their life savings. You preyed on trust, exploited family relationships, and showed no remorse for the lives you destroyed. The court sentences you to 18 years in federal prison. 18 years. Marcus would be 55 when he got out, assuming anyone would hire an ex-convict with an elder fraud conviction. As they led him away, he looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, old woman. I smiled sweetly. Yes, it is. After the trial, Carol and I celebrated at the same restaurant where Marcus had first tried to manipulate me. You realize you've become something of a legend in elder law circles, she said, raising her wine glass. How so? You're the widow who fought back and won. You've inspired other victims to come forward, other families to question suspicious relatives. Good. No one should suffer what Marcus planned for me. What's next for you? I thought about Emma, rebuilding her life with hard-won wisdom. I thought about the other victims Marcus had destroyed over the years. I thought about Robert's trust, and the power it gave me to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Next, I make sure this never happens to anyone else. How? By using every resource at my disposal to hunt down predators before they find their next victim. Carol smiled. That sounds expensive. I can afford it. That night, I sat in my kitchen reading Robert's letter one final time. He'd known this day would come. He'd prepared me for it. He'd given me the weapons to win a war I didn't even know was being fought. But more than that, he'd given me permission to be dangerous. Marcus Thornfield had learned too late that some widows bite back, and some bites are fatal. The aftermath of Marcus's conviction brought unexpected visitors to my door. Emma's mother-in-law, Patricia, arrived Tuesday morning, dripping with desperation, disguised as dignity. Sylvia, we need to discuss this unfortunate situation. Come in, Patricia. I was wondering when you'd show up. She swept into my living room, like she still owned the world, but I could see the cracks in her facade. The jewelry was still there, but it looked somehow cheaper. The designer clothes were perfectly pressed, but slightly dated. This vendetta against Marcus has gone too far. Vendetta? Is that what we're calling prosecuting criminals now? He made a mistake. People don't deserve to have their lives destroyed over one error in judgment. One error? Patricia, your son systematically targeted elderly women for years. This wasn't a mistake, it was his business model. She shifted uncomfortably, her mask of superiority slipping. The family is suffering because of your actions. The family is suffering because of Marcus's crimes. We're losing everything. The house, the business, our reputation, and there it was. Not concern for Marcus, not remorse for his victims, but worry about their own social standing. How tragic. I'm sure the elderly women Marcus robbed would be devastated to hear about your inconvenience. You don't understand. We have obligations, commitments. You had obligations to raise a son who didn't prey on vulnerable people. How did that work out? Patricia's composure cracked completely. What do you want from us? Nothing. I already got what I wanted. Justice. There must be something. Money, public apology. Surely we can work something out. I studied her face, seeing the desperation she was trying so hard to hide. Actually, there is something you can do. Hope flickered in her eyes. What? Disappear. Move away. Change your name. Make sure no member of your family ever targets another elderly person. That's unreasonable. Prison is unreasonable. Poverty is unreasonable. Losing your independence to a predator is unreasonable. My request is perfectly reasonable. Patricia left without another word, her dignity in tatters. Wednesday brought Marcus's former business partner, a sleazy man named Richard, who'd apparently been coordinating the elder fraud network. Mrs. Hartley, I think we can help each other. I doubt that very much. I have information about other victims. Names, amounts stolen, methods used, information that could help you recover losses. In exchange for what? Leniency for Marcus? Maybe a reduced sentence, early parole? I laughed, actually laughed at his audacity. Richard, let me explain something. I don't negotiate with criminals. I destroy them. You're making a mistake. We could be valuable allies. You could be valuable inmates, which coincidentally is exactly what you're about to become. I called Carol immediately after he left. By Friday, Richard was under federal investigation for his role in the fraud network. The following week brought a parade of Marcus's associates, each trying to bargain their way out of prosecution. Real estate agents who'd helped launder stolen money, lawyers who'd prepared fraudulent documents, bank employees who'd helped move assets. One by one, I sent them all to Carol and the FBI. You're building quite the reputation, Carol observed during one of our weekly meetings. Word is getting out that targeting you was Marcus's fatal mistake. Good. Fear is an excellent deterrent. The federal prosecutor says your case is going to revolutionize how they handle elder fraud networks. How so? Usually they catch one or two people and call it a victory. Your case is giving them access to an entire criminal organization. And the other victims? 37 confirmed so far, with more coming forward every week. Total damages over $12 million. $12 million stolen from elderly people who'd trusted the wrong person. Can we get their money back? Most of it. The federal asset forfeiture laws are very favorable when criminal enterprises are involved. What about Marcus specifically? His personal assets are being liquidated. The house, cars, jewelry, everything. It'll be distributed among his victims. Including me? You weren't actually victimized financially, since you never signed the papers. Then my share goes to the other victims. Sylvia, that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can spare it. That evening, Emma came over for dinner, looking healthier than she had in months. The divorce is final, she announced. How do you feel? Free, terrified, but free. Terrified of what? Of making the same mistake again, of trusting the wrong person. Emma, what Marcus did to you wasn't your fault, but I brought him into our family. I gave him access to you. And when you learned the truth, you chose justice over comfort. That takes courage. Did it ever occur to you that you might be in danger? That Marcus's associates might try to retaliate? I smiled, thinking of the security measures Carol had helped me implement, the connections with law enforcement, the very public nature of my victory. Let them try. I'm not the helpless widow they think I am. No, you're definitely not that. As Emma left that night, I reflected on how much had changed since Marcus first approached me with his fraudulent concern. 6 months ago, I'd been hiding my resources, playing the role of modest widow, keeping my head down. Now I was someone whose phone calls got returned immediately, whose concerns were taken seriously, whose enemies ended up in federal prison. But more importantly, I'd become someone who mattered to people who needed protection. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Carol's voice was excited. Sylvia, we just got a break in the federal case. Marcus is cooperating. What's he telling them? Everything. Names, methods, locations, bank accounts. The entire elder fraud network is about to collapse. And in exchange, reduced sentence. He'll still do significant time, but not the full 18 years. I thought about Marcus in his prison cell, finally understanding that actions have consequences, that predators sometimes become prey. How much time? Probably 8 to 10 years, with good behavior. 8 years. Marcus would be 43 when he got out, with a federal conviction that would follow him forever. That's acceptable. There's something else. The federal prosecutor wants to interview you about creating a victim advocacy program. What kind of program? Training for law enforcement. Resources for victims, legal support for prosecutions. They want to use your case as a model. I smiled, thinking of Robert's legacy and how he'd equipped me not just to protect myself, but to protect others. Set up the meeting. As I hung up, I realized that Marcus Thornfield had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible, a purpose that matched my resources. He'd tried to steal my independence and ended up giving me a mission. Some mistakes are more expensive than others. His had cost him everything and given me exactly what I needed to become dangerous to people like him. Justice, I decided, had an excellent sense of irony. The federal prosecutor's office felt different from local law enforcement, more serious, more professional, more expensive. Agent Sarah Torres greeted me with the kind of respect usually reserved for major political donors. Mrs. Hartley, your case has become our gold standard for elder fraud prosecution. How so? Most victims are too embarrassed or confused to fight back effectively. You not only fought back, you destroyed an entire criminal network. I had good resources, and you used them strategically. That's what we want to discuss. Agent Torres spread files across the conference table. Photos, financial records, organizational charts showing the scope of Marcus's operation. 39 victims across 6 states. Average loss of $300,000 per victim. Total damages approaching $15 million. $15 million stolen from elderly people who'd trusted the wrong charming young men. What happened to the other victims? Most lost their independence, their savings, their confidence in their own judgment. Several were placed in nursing homes against their will. 3 died while their assets were being systematically stolen. 3 people died while being robbed. The number hit me like a physical blow. What can we do for them? For the dead? Nothing. For the survivors? Everything, if you're willing to help. What kind of help? Agent Torres pulled out a thick folder labeled Victim Advocacy Initiative. We want to create a program that does for other victims what you did for yourself. Legal resources, financial protection, criminal prosecution support. Funded how? Combination of federal grants, asset forfeiture funds, and private donations. Private donations. She was asking me to bankroll justice for elderly fraud victims. How much would this cost? Initial startup around $2 million. Ongoing operations maybe $5 million annually. $5 million a year. A significant chunk of Robert's trust, but not enough to impact my security. And in exchange, we systematically destroy every elder fraud operation in the country. I thought about the 3 victims who'd died while being robbed, about the others who'd lost everything to predators like Marcus. Where do I sign? The paperwork took 3 hours. When we finished, I was the primary funding source for the most comprehensive elder fraud prosecution program in federal history. Mrs. Hartley, you realize you've just declared war on a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry? Good. Wars keep life interesting. That evening, Emma and I celebrated the new program over dinner at the restaurant where Marcus had first tried to manipulate me. Mom, are you sure about spending this much money on strangers? They're not strangers. They're people who got targeted by predators like your ex-husband. But $5 million a year is less than I earn in investment income. Your father built this wealth to protect people. I'm finally using it the way he intended. And if the program doesn't work, then we'll build a better one. Money is only useful if you use it for something that matters. Emma raised her wine glass. To making predators pay, to making them extinct. The program launched 3 months later with spectacular results. Within the first week, we'd opened investigations in 12 states. Within the first month, we'd arrested 17 people connected to elder fraud networks. But the most satisfying call came on a Tuesday morning from Agent Torres. Mrs. Hartley, we just arrested Marcus's former mentor. His mentor? The man who taught him how to target elderly women. Been running these schemes for 20 years. Your program gave us the resources to build a case against him. What's his name? William Thornfield, Marcus's uncle. Marcus's uncle. The family business was literally stealing from elderly people. How many victims? Over 100, dating back to the 1990s. He's been systematically destroying lives for decades. And now? Now he's facing life in prison without parole. The federal charges alone will keep him locked up until he dies. Life in prison for stealing from elderly people. Finally, consequences that matched the crime. There's something else, Agent Torres continued. He wants to make a deal. What kind of deal? Full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Names, methods, locations of other networks across the country. And you're considering this? We're considering it because his information could help us shut down elder fraud operations in 30 states. I thought about justice versus revenge, about protecting future victims versus punishing past crimes. Take the deal, but make sure he serves significant time, at least 15 years, even with cooperation. 15 years. William Thornfield would be 80 when he got out, assuming he lived that long in prison. Acceptable. The information William provided was devastating to elder fraud networks nationwide. Within 6 months, our program had facilitated arrests in 23 states. The criminal organizations that had preyed on elderly victims for decades were collapsing like houses of cards. You've become the most feared individual in elder fraud circles, Carol told me during one of our meetings. They're actually warning each other about targeting widows because they might end up with another Sylvia Hartley situation. What's a Sylvia Hartley situation? Complete destruction of their criminal enterprise, federal prosecution, and asset forfeiture that leaves them bankrupt. Perfect. Fear is the best deterrent. There's talk of naming the federal elder fraud statute after you. The Hartley Act? The Don't Mess with Widows Act was mentioned, but they thought that might be too informal. I laughed, thinking of Robert and how proud he'd be that his careful planning had led to protecting thousands of elderly people. Either name works for me. That evening, I sat in my garden reading the latest program reports. In 1 year, we'd recovered over $40 million for fraud victims. We'd sent dozens of predators to prison. We'd created a network of protection that extended across the entire country. But more importantly, we'd sent a message that elderly people were no longer easy targets. The phone rang, interrupting my reflection. Emma's voice was excited. Mom, turn on the news, Channel 7. I found the remote and switched to the local news, where a reporter was standing outside the federal courthouse. In a stunning development, authorities have arrested the entire leadership of what they're calling the largest elder fraud network in U.S. history. The investigation, funded by a private donor who wishes to remain anonymous, has resulted in charges against 43 individuals across 15 states. 43 arrests. 15 states. The network that had destroyed so many lives was finally being destroyed itself. Mom, are you watching? I'm watching. How does it feel? I thought about Marcus in his prison cell, about William Thornfield facing life behind bars, about the hundreds of victims who would finally get justice. It feels like your father's money is being used exactly the way he intended. And how's that? To turn helpless widows into very dangerous enemies of people who prey on the vulnerable. As I hung up, I realized that Marcus Thornfield had made the most expensive mistake in elder fraud history. He'd targeted a widow who had the resources to fight back and the will to destroy anyone who threatened her. But more than that, he'd awakened something in me that I didn't know existed. The absolute determination to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Robert had left me $33 million to stay safe. I'd used it to make the world safer for everyone. Some legacies are worth more than money. This one was worth everything. 2 years after Marcus's conviction, I sat in my kitchen reading a letter that made my morning coffee taste like victory. It was from Patricia Hoffman, the elderly teacher who'd been Marcus's first victim. Dear Sylvia, I wanted you to know that I got my house back. The Federal Asset Recovery Program returned everything Marcus stole from me, plus damages. But more than that, I got my confidence back. I'm no longer afraid to make my own decisions or trust my own judgment. Thank you for showing me that we don't have to be victims. Patricia's letter was one of dozens I'd received from fraud victims whose lives had been restored by our program. Each one reminded me why Robert's trust had been used correctly, not for luxury or comfort, but for justice and protection. The doorbell interrupted my reflection. I opened it to find a familiar face, Agent Torres, holding a bottle of champagne and wearing the biggest smile I'd seen since Marcus's conviction. Mrs. Hartley, we need to celebrate. What are we celebrating? The complete destruction of the elder fraud network that started with your case. She followed me into the kitchen, where she spread newspaper clippings across my table like trophies. Final numbers: 67 arrests, 49 convictions, over $80 million recovered for victims. $80 million returned to elderly people who'd been robbed by charming predators. And Marcus's associates? All of them convicted. Richard got 12 years. The lawyers got disbarred and prison time. Even the bank employees who helped launder money are facing federal charges. What about the victims? 93% recovered their stolen assets. The others received compensation from the victim fund you established. 93%. Almost everyone who'd been robbed got their money back. And Marcus himself? Still in federal prison. Still cooperating with investigations, still facing the reality that his choices destroyed his life and dozens of others. I poured 2 cups of coffee, thinking about the chain of events that had started with a humiliating seating arrangement at my daughter's wedding. Any regrets about how we handled this? Agent Torres looked at me seriously. Mrs. Hartley, your case changed how federal law enforcement approaches elder fraud. Before you, we treated these as individual crimes. Now we recognize them as organized criminal enterprises that require comprehensive response. Meaning Marcus Thornfield accidentally created the most effective elder protection program in American history. I laughed, savoring the irony. He really did pick the wrong widow. He picked the wrong everything. Wrong victim, wrong family, wrong crime, wrong decade. Everything about his approach was catastrophically wrong. And now his name is synonymous with failure in criminal circles. We've intercepted communications where fraud networks specifically warn against targeting widows because of the Thornfield disaster. The Thornfield disaster. Marcus had become a cautionary tale for other predators. What's next for the program? Expansion. We're training local law enforcement in 20 more states. We're creating victim advocacy centers in major cities. We're developing early warning systems to identify potential targets before predators find them. Funded how? The program is now self-sustaining through asset forfeiture from convicted criminals. Your initial investment has created a permanent protection system. Self-sustaining. Robert's money had bought permanent protection for vulnerable elderly people. Any new threats we should be aware of? Always. But now we're hunting them instead of waiting for victims to report crimes. After Agent Torres left, I called Emma to share the good news. Mom, you realize you've become legendary, right? How so? I was at the grocery store yesterday, and I overheard 2 elderly women talking about the widow who fought back. They were discussing your case like it was a superhero movie. I'm hardly a superhero. You are to people who were being targeted by predators. You proved that elderly people don't have to be victims. I had advantages most people don't have. You had Robert's money? Yes. But you also had something money can't buy. What's that? The courage to fight back when everyone expected you to surrender. That evening, I walked through my house, thinking about how different my life had become. 2 years ago, I'd been playing the role of modest widow, hiding my resources, keeping my head down. Now I was someone whose opinions mattered to federal prosecutors, whose phone calls got returned by senators, whose example inspired other elderly people to resist manipulation. But more importantly, I'd become someone who mattered to people who needed protection. The phone rang. Carol, with news that made my evening complete. Sylvia, I just got off the phone with the federal prosecutor's office. They want to nominate you for a presidential award for public service. What kind of award? The Medal of Freedom, for your contributions to elder protection and criminal justice. The Medal of Freedom. the highest civilian honor in the country. That seems excessive for protecting myself from my daughter's ex-husband. It's not excessive for creating a program that's protected thousands of elderly Americans from financial predators. I thought about Robert's letter, about his trust in my ability to use his resources wisely, about the battle fund he'd created specifically for fighting back against people like Marcus. Will accepting the award require public appearances? Probably. The White House ceremony, media interviews, speaking engagements. Then I'll do it. If my visibility helps other victims find courage to fight back, it's worth the exposure. There's one more thing. They want Emma to attend the ceremony. Why Emma? Because your daughter's courage in choosing justice over comfortable lies is part of what made this program possible. Emma's courage. She'd lost a husband, but gained something more valuable. The knowledge that she'd chosen truth over convenient deception. I'll ask her, Sylvia, can I tell you something personal? Of course. When I started practicing elder law 20 years ago, I never thought I'd see the day when predators were afraid of their potential victims. You've changed the entire dynamic. Robert's money changed the dynamic. I just used it correctly. Money is just a tool. You're the one who turned it into a weapon for justice. As I hung up, I realized that Marcus Thornfield had given me the greatest gift imaginable, a purpose that matched my resources, and a mission that honored Robert's memory. He'd tried to steal my independence and instead given me a reason to fight for everyone's independence. Some mistakes create exactly the opposite of their intended outcome. Marcus had intended to make me helpless. Instead, he'd made me incredibly dangerous to people like him. And that danger would last for the rest of my life. Funded by Robert's trust and motivated by the knowledge that elderly people deserved protection, not predation. The Medal of Freedom ceremony was 6 months away. I had 6 months to figure out how to use that platform to make predators even more afraid of their potential victims. It was going to be a very productive 6 months. The White House ceremony took place on a crisp October morning that felt like victory distilled into weather. Emma and I sat in the East Room surrounded by other Medal of Freedom recipients, scientists, artists, civil rights leaders, and one widow who'd accidentally started a war against elder fraud. Mrs. Sylvia Hartley, the president announced, for her extraordinary contributions to criminal justice and elder protection, demonstrating that ordinary citizens can achieve extraordinary results when they refuse to accept injustice. As I walked to the podium, I thought about Marcus Thornfield sitting in his prison cell, probably watching this ceremony on television and realizing the full scope of his catastrophic mistake. Thank you, Mr. President. 2 years ago, I was a widow trying to live quietly and avoid trouble. I learned something important. Trouble doesn't avoid you just because you're polite to it. Laughter rippled through the distinguished audience. When someone tried to steal my independence under the guise of protection, I discovered that the best defense against predators is becoming a more dangerous predator yourself. The applause was thunderous. This medal doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to every elderly person who's ever been told they're too old to make their own decisions, too confused to manage their own lives, too vulnerable to protect their own interests. I looked directly into the television cameras. To anyone who preys on elderly people, we're watching, we're organized, we're well-funded, and we're very, very angry. Find a different line of work. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. After the ceremony, Emma and I celebrated at the hotel bar, surrounded by Secret Service agents and fellow medal recipients. Mom, did you just threaten criminals on national television? I promised them consequences. There's a difference. The president looked impressed. Good. Presidential support makes our funding more secure. What's next? Next, we use this platform to expand the program internationally. Elder fraud is global. Our response should be too. The media attention from the ceremony was extraordinary. Within a week, I'd given interviews to every major news network, several international outlets, and 3 documentary filmmakers. Each interview carried the same message. Elderly people were no longer easy targets, and predators who thought otherwise would face systematic destruction. The response was immediate and satisfying. Law enforcement agencies from 12 countries contacted our program requesting assistance with their own elder fraud cases. But the most satisfying call came from Agent Torres. Mrs. Hartley, we're seeing something unprecedented. What's that? Elder fraud reports are down 60% nationally, not because fewer crimes are being committed, because fewer people are attempting them. Fear is an excellent deterrent. It's more than fear. Word has spread through criminal networks that targeting elderly people now carries unacceptable risk. What kind of risk? Federal prosecution, asset forfeiture, and the possibility of facing a Sylvia Hartley situation. I'd become a threat that criminals warned each other about. Marcus's attempt to victimize me had turned me into every predator's nightmare. Any specific threats against me personally? None credible. Most criminals are smart enough to realize that attacking you would bring down the full weight of federal law enforcement. And the ones who aren't that smart? We'll learn the hard way that some targets fight back with unlimited resources. That evening, I sat in my garden reading letters from fraud victims whose lives had been restored by our program. Teachers who'd gotten their pensions back, veterans who'd recovered their disability payments, widows who'd regained their independence. Each letter reminded me that Robert's trust was being used exactly as he'd intended, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. The phone rang. Carol's voice was excited. "Sylvia, Congress wants to hold hearings on elder fraud prevention. They want you to testify." "About what?" "About creating a permanent federal program based on our model. They're considering legislation that would make elder fraud a federal crime punishable by life imprisonment. Life imprisonment for stealing from elderly people. Finally, consequences that matched the damage." "When do they want me to testify?" "Next month. Committee on Aging, full Senate hearing, national television coverage." "Perfect. It's time to make this program permanent." "There's something else. Marcus's parole hearing is scheduled for the same week." "His parole hearing? He served 5 years, technically eligible for early release with good behavior." I smiled, thinking of the timing. While I was testifying about protecting elderly people, Marcus would be begging for freedom he didn't deserve. "Will I have the opportunity to speak at his hearing?" "Victim impact statement, yes. You could argue against his release." "Good. I have a few things to say about Marcus Thornfield's rehabilitation." The Senate hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday. Marcus's parole hearing was Thursday. I had 1 week to prepare testimony that would cement the federal program and ensure Marcus stayed exactly where he belonged. It was going to be a very busy week. But as I looked around my garden, thinking about Robert's legacy and the war it had funded, I realized I'd never been more prepared for battle. Marcus Thornfield had spent 5 years in prison learning that actions have consequences. He was about to learn that some consequences last forever. The parole board was about to meet a widow who'd spent 5 years building a criminal justice program specifically designed to destroy people like Marcus. This was going to be educational for everyone involved, especially for Marcus. The Senate hearing room felt like a cathedral of justice, with marble columns and enough television cameras to broadcast my testimony to every potential predator in America. I sat at the witness table wearing my best armor, a navy suit that whispered authority, and the diamond earrings Robert had given me for our 40th anniversary. "Mrs. Hartley," Senator Williams began, "you've created the most successful elder fraud prevention program in American history. How did a retired widow become the nation's leading expert on protecting elderly Americans?" "I became an expert by refusing to become a victim, Senator. When someone tried to steal my independence, I decided to make sure it never happened to anyone else." "Tell us about your son-in-law's approach." I walked them through Marcus's systematic manipulation, the family connection, the false concern, the urgent timeline, the documents designed to steal control of my life. He targeted me because he thought I was helpless, isolated, and trusting. He was wrong on all counts. "What made you fight back when most victims don't?" "My husband left me resources to protect myself, but more importantly, he left me permission to be dangerous to people who prey on the vulnerable." The hearing room was silent except for the clicking of cameras. "Dangerous how?" "Dangerous enough to destroy criminal enterprises that target elderly people. Dangerous enough to send dozens of predators to federal prison. Dangerous enough that criminals now warn each other about the risks of targeting widows." Senator Chen leaned forward. "What would you say to elderly Americans who feel vulnerable to these schemes?" I looked directly into the television cameras, knowing that somewhere Marcus was watching from his prison cell. "I'd say that vulnerability is a choice. You can choose to be helpless, or you can choose to be terrifying to people who want to hurt you. I recommend terrifying." The applause was deafening. "What legislative changes would you recommend?" "Make elder fraud a federal crime punishable by life imprisonment. Make it so expensive and dangerous that no rational criminal would attempt it." "Life imprisonment seems severe." "Senator, stealing an elderly person's independence is a life sentence for the victim. The punishment should match the crime." The hearing lasted 4 hours. When it ended, I'd effectively written the blueprint for permanent federal legislation that would protect elderly Americans for generations. 2 days later, I sat in a different kind of room, smaller, grimmer, where Marcus Thornfield would face a parole board that would determine whether he spent the next decade in prison or walking free. Marcus entered in prison clothes, looking older, thinner, diminished. 5 years of federal prison had stripped away his polished veneer, revealing the desperate predator underneath. His lawyer presented the standard arguments: model prisoner, rehabilitation programs, remorse for his actions. Then it was my turn. Members of the board, 5 years ago, Marcus Thornfield targeted me because he thought I was a helpless widow with modest assets he could steal. He was catastrophically wrong on both counts. I opened my folder and spread financial documents across the table. Mr. Thornfield wasn't targeting modest assets. He was attempting to steal $33 million from a widow who had the resources to destroy him. The parole board members' eyes widened. And destroy him I did. His criminal operation was dismantled. His associates were prosecuted. His victims recovered their stolen assets. His name became synonymous with failure in criminal circles. Marcus's face had gone white. But the real question isn't what I did to Mr. Thornfield. The question is whether he's learned anything from the experience. I looked directly at Marcus, who was staring at me with the same hatred I'd seen at his sentencing. Mr. Thornfield, have you learned that elderly people can fight back? His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Marcus couldn't resist responding. I learned that some people have more money than they deserve. The room fell silent. After 5 years in prison, Marcus was still bitter about failing to steal my inheritance. And that, members of the board, is why Mr. Thornfield should serve his full sentence. He's not rehabilitated. He's just angry that his victim had bigger teeth than he expected. The parole board deliberated for 27 minutes. Mr. Thornfield, your parole is denied. You will serve your full sentence. Your next parole hearing will be in 3 years. 3 more years. Marcus would be 46 when he got out, with a federal conviction that would follow him forever. As they led him away, he looked at me one final time. This isn't over. I smiled sweetly. Yes, it is. Outside the hearing room, Emma was waiting with champagne and the biggest smile I'd seen since Marcus's original conviction. How does it feel, Mom? Complete. Marcus is staying in prison. The federal program is becoming permanent, and elderly people across the country are safer because one predator made the mistake of targeting the wrong widow. And the program will outlive both of us. Robert's Trust has created a permanent protection system that will hunt predators long after I'm gone. We drove home through the city where this war had begun, past the restaurant where Marcus had first tried to manipulate me, past the courthouse where he'd been convicted, past the hotel where Emma had decided to choose truth over comfortable lies. Mom, can I ask you something? Anything. Are you happy with how this turned out? I thought about Robert's letter, about his trust in my ability to protect myself and others, about the $33 million that had become a weapon for justice. I'm proud. I'm satisfied. I'm grateful that your father gave me the tools to fight back. And Marcus? Marcus gave me the greatest gift possible, a purpose that matched my resources. How so? He tried to steal my independence and accidentally gave me a mission to protect everyone's independence. As we pulled into my driveway, I realized the circle was complete. 2 years ago, I'd been a modest widow hiding behind flower arrangements. Tonight, I was a Medal of Freedom recipient who'd declared war on an entire category of criminal and won. Marcus Thornfield had learned too late that some widows don't just bite back, they bite with federal funding, unlimited resources, and the absolute determination to protect people who can't protect themselves. The war was over. Justice had won. And somewhere in a federal prison, Marcus Thornfield was learning that some mistakes last forever. Robert's $33 million had bought the most expensive lesson in American criminal history. Never underestimate a widow with unlimited resources and a very good lawyer. Some lessons are worth every penny. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.